Welcome to Wooden Spoon Data, the 18th best AFL content on YouTube. Going over this week by myself without Chris. He's off in WA doing work and should be back in about 2 weeks. But yeah, we'll start off with the first game. We've got Carlton winning by 1 over Melbourne, and it was quite the match. I nearly forgot it was on. I keep forgetting Thursday nights have matches, and yeah, turned it on, and Melbourne was goalless in the first quarter, which I believe was the first time since 2008. Carlton ended up winning by 1 point. Jake Lever, who was best of field against Geelong in round eight, faced a much taller opponent in DeCoing, and I think DeCoing had the better of him for the first half, though it did seem like Lever kind of got back into it. Though Carlton ended up leading by Carlton ended up leading by 37.7 minutes into the third quarter. Petrarca kicked 5-1. He was a lone hand up forward despite spending a lot of the time in the midfield. And Harrison Petty and Keziah Pickett were disposalless with less than 2 minutes to go in the second term. The game did look pretty much over at halftime. And if Melbourne hadn't kicked 4-4 to 1-1 in the last quarter, it wouldn't have particularly been super close. Um, I do think the best part of the match was Viney's knock into Windsor's goal. That was just an incredible moment. In general, I thought Pitnet and DeCoing did pretty well over Max Gawn. Adam Chera did succumb to another injury, hamstring as well. It's another one for Carlton there, and it's going to start raising questions about their soft term injuries. I think it's already started internally, but I think we'll see it more externally now. In terms of this result and long term, I think it's a bit of an 8 point match. I suppose in terms of what I think will happen, I think both these teams are pretty close to top four, and this could decide whether one team makes it or not. And yeah, the D's are going to need to win some against other good opponents to really stake their claim in there. Moving on to the second match, we had Cats versus Port. Another match I thought was over at half time, with Port leading the Cats by 41. From there, the Cats went on a roll, kicking 9-5, 59 to Port's 3-6, 24, only just coming 6 points short. Willie Rioli kicked a career equaling best of 4 goals. Port captain Zach Butters for the night had 34-7 clearances and a goal, and Wines got 33 disposals, 9 clearances, and a goal. They stood up in Rosie's absence. It was meant to be a big night for the Tomahawk, who drew level with Joel Selwood in terms of games. But yeah, he did only get the 1 goal, and he's only kicked 10 goals in 8 matches. He will be managed this week with Jeremy Cameron too. So this could be a little bit of a danger game against the Suns. And yeah, if they don't win that, and then they lose to the Giants the week after, it'll be 4 weeks of losses in a row. So it is starting to come to that point of the season for Geelong. If they start losing some more players, it could be difficult. But Port played pretty well. Port to play the Hawks. It's a good opportunity to get some form and get people back. Take a bit more time off. But yeah, it's great performance by the Cats to get back into it. Though it was always going to be tough when you're that far down. Nearly a miracle on grass sort of situation, but didn't quite get there. Moving on to Freo versus Sydney. Sydney, I think it was pretty obvious they were going to win after the loss of former teammate Cam McCarthy. 11 Dockers had played with Cam, and yeah, it was always going to be a tough matchup when you kind of heard about that. So it was tough seeing Fife and Pierce cry beforehand. That was heartfelt, and yeah, it was sad one. I felt like this was a perfect example of scoreboard pressure in a game. At halftime, it was 1 goal 8 to 9 goals straight. And the expected score was Freo 35 to Sydney 42. Um, the final score had Freo only 39 and Sydney was 87. But yeah, it's one of those ones where if Freo had managed to kick straight, they might have stayed in the game further. But I never really saw it with how much they were missing. It's hard to take much from this match. Freo did well, all things considered. I suppose it's what Sydney would have wanted to see being away from home as well. In terms of our media watch,
What about the media?
I wanted to mention Cam's McCarthy's. Just some of the comments around it wasn't great. Mostly supporters, so not too many actual but publications, but yeah, it was something to just kind of keep in mind. It's a loss, Just there's no need to speculate. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was also for a team in the West in WA, and there was the Simpson press conference before the match against Collingwood. James, roll the tape first before I say anything.
You're hoping that Harley crosses swords with him at some stage?
Crosses swords with him. No. Look, they might play on each other at stages. It'll be, Harley's 19. Dacos is probably the best player in the competition, so he's learning so much every week.
So for the record, that's an odd question to ask in case you don't know, but I think 100% of my audience is male. So I'm sure pretty much everybody knows. Like for the record, if Harley Reid wanted to cross swords with anybody, I'm all for it. Whatever. Um, it also probably brings me another point in the media. There's been another person coming out saying they've had a relationship with an Australian footballer. Homosexual relationship, and kind of not really outing gay players, but kind of putting what I would say is more pressure on kind of anybody in the world that likes males. And yeah, I think just let them be them. Who really cares? But yeah, that's what I think. Who really cares in the end of the day? Um, we'll go on to who's that footballer.
Who's that?
Footballer.
It's
Ashley Sappy.
Driving ball forward. That is a contender.
Moving on to the next match, we go to my team's pitiful performance against the Hawks. They got it done without Sicily. St Kilda looked somewhat competitive until quarter time with 21 points, but they only managed 39 till three-quarter time, losing 58 to 53. John Newcombe was back to his best in the midfield with a game-high 31 disposals and 8 clearances. He also had 17 contested possessions, which was his third best in his career. Dylan Moore starred in a captaincy role, kicking 2. Meek played well against Marshall. And for St Kilda, Battle played well and kicked 2 when swung forward. St Kilda's second ruck, Hayes, was subbed out for Patton. Ross himself said in St Kilda's last week's win that they needed some more movement. They looked desperate for a spark. The Saints looked flat-footed and fairly predictable against the Hawks today, the other day. Moving their ball conservatively and with none of the pace or flair that got them into the final last year. They sit in 14th place. If they lose to Freo next week, I think it's time to get creative with the magnets and start dropping some players that have been underperforming. They did see it with Philippou this week already, so I think they're starting to kind of get to that point. Do I think the Hawks finish above St Kilda this year? Current form, possibly. I think it might end up being fairly close, and that's unfortunate to say as a St Kilda supporter. So I suppose what is wrong with St Kilda? Look, we've got a fairly similar forward line. I think we don't have enough smalls that do enough. We're missing Dan Butler and and Higgins at the moment. We've got Garcia in there who's applying some good tackling forward pressure, but that's about it. We need some more. It'll be a good game for Collard, maybe. Essentially, yeah, they're just finding their feet. They need movement into the 50 to be better, and then they might see some better results. But it's not going to be their year, and it's might be time to look into next year. Going on to Giants versus Essendon, I'm sure Chris would love to be here for this game. Giants got out to an early lead, 27-8 in the first quarter, but from there it was all Bombers, winning 12-10-82 to 9-8-62. Langford kicked 4-1 with 5 marks inside 50 and 4 tackles inside 50. He's quietly putting his hand up for an All-Australian spot. Goldstein dominated Briggs, setting up 5 score launches, 14 hitouts to advantage to Briggs's mere 5. Martin is looking more and more comfortable in his role each week, and Martin is looking more and more comfortable in his role each week, with 8 tackles for the most in the game and the most in terms of meters gained at 650. Uh, the Bombers are in third now, which is honestly a bit of a surprise to me. There is only four 4 points between eighth and first, between Collingwood and eighth and third, between Collingwood and Essendon. Um, I guess they were in a similar position last year. So my question would be, do we see them staying there? Are they going to be there at the end of the year and get their first finals win in quite some time? I think they need to show they're serious over the next few weeks. They've got a few easy games and then a hard one. So they've got North, Richmond, the Suns, and then Carlton before their bye. So I think if they get away with 4 wins there, they're pretty serious. If they were to lose more than just Carlton, I think there's potential problems. What went wrong for GWS? Their mids just didn't win enough ball and they didn't transition it into the forward line. Um, there was just less inside 50s. Other than that, it's probably not something to worry about long term. They do have a couple injuries, and I think it's something they can address as the season goes on. So yeah, I think they're still quite in a good form for the end of the year. Moving on to the next match between Richmond and the Dogs. Um, in the end, it was pretty much a demolition by the Dogs. They won the inside 50 count by 36, generated 77 inside 50s for the most in the club's history. Richmond was done before half time, minus 106 disposals, minus 36 inside 50s, minus 13 tackles, minus 9 marks inside 50. Score from turnover was minus 50. The Bulldogs ended up tripling Richmond's scoring shots, 19-19, 133 to 6-6, 42. Ed Richards starred in his new role in the midfield. Richmond had got more injuries. Jack Graham in his first match back did a hamstring. Maurice Rioli Jr. rather, had a lower leg injury towards the end, and Sam Banks copped a nasty concussion. The Tigers' injury list now sits in double figures, and Adam Muse's got to have one of the hardest jobs in footy at the moment. Besides maybe Bevo, who's probably got a few people off his back this week, but yeah, it's not going to be fun looking forward. And I wonder if he's really going to survive the entirety of the rebuild. Um, Moving on, I think it's time for Sharon Shenanigans.
Oh, look at this. Great shot of something not so good. Bang!
Yeah, so this week's Sharon Shenanigan is unfortunately a St Kilda player in Rowan Marshall, and he nearly got one a few weeks back. He marked on the goal line, which is what you want your ruck to do, and then he decided to chip it 30 metres down the centre to Ginnivan, straight to Ginnivan on his chest. And look, he beat himself up on it and he came back good, but and he was lucky because Ginnivan ended up walking in and missing it from about 30 metres out, just getting a point. So that was pretty much the Sharon Shenanigan of the week for me. Otherwise, we'll move on to an unsung hero.
The first to pitch in are those unsung heroes.
This week's unsung hero for me is Tom DeCoing. I suppose I was really impressed by his match. He's been getting better and better every year, but he shut down Lever, and then he tapped out in the ruck against Gorn, and yeah, really just showed his worth and what a gun player. So he doesn't always get the chops. He might not be an unsung hero in some regards, but probably because he does get a few chops, but um, yeah, for me, he just did a job that not many people were singing the praises of over this last week and few weeks. So yeah, he deserves more talking about. Moving on to the Suns versus North. North trailed by 6 points at quarter time and probably could have led. Such was their control of the play. They did a keepings off style early, but kind of butchered their final ball moving inside 50. Um, Gold Coast, Gold Coast overcame their slow start before storming away 17-18, 120 to 7-10, 52. The Suns' winning record of 69 is the highest in their club's history at TIO Stadium, surpassing 67 against the Hawks in round 11, 2022. Lloyd Johnson, a Northern Territory product, kicked his first goal of his career. He had about 30 family members there, and they were quite possibly the loudest people of the entire match. I did notice it was really quite quiet. Um, it's one thing that I kind of thought we should have heard a bit more from North. Um, just back to COVID days when you could kind of hear players. Considering how quiet the stadium was, we just didn't hear much from the players, and I don't think the Suns needed to say much, but yeah, North probably needed to be talking a bit more, and it does make me wonder. At times they look spent, but at other times they look disinterested. And yeah, you're getting some better results out of players that are quite young, like Archer, than you do say Zerha in some regards in forward 50 pressure and things like that. So um, yeah, I suppose for me it's a bit of a worry. I wonder if Zerha's tapped out already, and kind of thinking about his next plans, and Davies Uniacke kind of looks the same. He did play like he did play a good game. He got 17 contested possessions, but otherwise, I do think he looks not normal, and I wonder if he's thinking about next year. So there's a little bit to worry there with North. There has been for a little while now. I kind of thought, Suns maybe they can get it done. If not, it's got to be against West Coast. They're starting to mount some injuries, so they've got a little bit of time to kind of gather for that. But if not, it might be the last month of the year where they have three matches against bottom three sides, in Hawks, Richmond, and West Coast in round 21, I believe 22 and 24. So yeah, it's not looking great for them. Moving on to Collingwood Eagles. Collingwood effectively won the match before halftime. Their 7 goals from centre bounce was a club record, and they contributed to outscoring the Eagles by 63 points from stoppage change, their best differential since round 10, 2012. The Eagles lost ground ball gets by 23 after averaging 10.5 more than their opposition over the last month. With the Eagles' strength takeaway, they basically didn't have anything to give in the stoppages, and the Magpies kicked 10 consecutive goals between Tyler DeWar's first goal in league football and then Liam Ryan's first goal in the early final quarter. So yeah, it wasn't great for West Coast. Jeremy Howe was substituted out of the game at quarter time. That was bad to see as he was kind of the replacement for Myercheck. So I don't know who they're going to use next week. They also ended up losing Harvey Harrison, which was not great. He exited it around the same time with an ankle injury, and then later suffered a concussion to Jack Bytel in his first game for the Magpies, which was unfortunate to see. So yeah, more injuries on that front for Collingwood, but it's good to see they got the win. Reed versus Dacos was good to see when they did match up together. Finn McRae looked good with his 3 goals, and hopefully he gets more time and really has his spot there. Collingwood are losing players, but so did the Eagles. They lost Petruccelli to an ankle, Darling to his I think he got hit in the nose, and then McGovern landed badly and copped an internal injury. With those starting to mount, I do wonder if we're going to start seeing form from last year again. And yeah, hopefully their injuries don't last too long, so we can keep seeing a competitive West Coast. But look, we get to the final match in Adelaide versus Lions. It was a thrilling game to end the round with a draw. It was Adelaide's third ever draw and Brisbane's first since 2009. The Lions were tough on the inside, winning 10 more contested possessions and were able to take 42 more marks than Adelaide. Although they were only able to take 4 more than the Crows in the forward half, Adelaide began the game playing a forward half style of footy, generally registering more scores. I think they got 7 scores launched from their forward half in the first term. And in the second term, they moved it mostly to defensive half chains with Jordan Dawson kind of leading a lot of them. But yeah, it was good to see Jordan Dawson stand up as well. But yeah, what a thrilling final match. It kept kind of just getting either side of kind of a draw, and it really looked like it might end the whole final quarter. So yeah, it was interesting. I wonder if it is going to reignite the kind of draw debate that we saw previously, in terms of neither team taking home a win in extra time, but I don't think it will somehow. But yeah, we're going to move on to the rolling All Australian.
You're Australian. Be Australian.
And looking into this week's All Australian, we technically only have one change, but we start by seeing it in the back line. Luke Ryan, who is on our bench, will be swapping with Dan Houston, who will actually be losing his spot entirely. With that, we don't actually see any other changes across the actual field, and we move to the bench. Well, we still have Kerno, Matt Rowell, and Bailey Fritsch, though in the Luke Ryan position that is now departed, we've got Sam Walsh stepping in. So we've got quite a few Carlton players now, and they're rightfully in there with their spot in the ladder now. So yeah, Sam Walsh deserving of a spot since he's been back, and yeah, I think there's one or two others that maybe could have stepped in there with him. But yeah, we'll just have to see how the rest of the season looks. Moving on to next week's predictions, we've got the Cats playing the Suns in Darwin next week. I actually think this is a massive danger game for Geelong. The Suns have not lost a match in TIO Stadium, and Geelong have now lost both of their forwards in Cameron and Hawkins. So I think it could actually go to the Suns. So I'm gonna give them the tip here, even though they're probably underdogs. Moving on to Friday's match, we've got Sydney versus Carlton, which I think will be a really good match. It's at the SCG. I think this one just goes Sydney's way, just. But honestly, Carlton could really take it. So I'm going to tip the Swans, but not with huge confidence. Moving on to Saturday, we've got the first match between Collingwood and Adelaide in Melbourne. I think this one goes to Collingwood. They're finding some form despite their injuries, and I think, yeah, I think Adelaide might just struggle with the small forwards. I think they'll go in with an interesting game plan. Moving on to the Giants versus Western Bulldogs. I think last week people were talking about playing for Bevo. This will be the match where we really see if the Dogs are playing for Bevo or not. Um, Giants, we're a bit down this week against Essendon. So yeah, it's the week to kind of try and get them on some bad form if you can, and get over them. So Dogs need a good performance, but I will tip the Giants. Then it's St Kilda versus Fremantle. St Kilda need to win this. Absolutely need to. It is in Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. I'm gonna reluctantly tip St Kilda, though. If they lose, I think it's almost just tank this season. Get your best pick possible, and reset for next year. Try not to get any major injuries. Um, Looking at the match after, we've got Lions versus Richmond in the Gabba. Look, this is going to be a big Lions win. It'll be Yeah, it'll be the one where we start really questioning whether Richmond can do much going long term, I reckon. After that, we've got Sunday's matchups: Essendon versus North. Essendon just have to get this done. North have to be more competitive, but Essendon is my tip. Um, Look, Port, Hawthorn. Hawthorn's played really well. Port's been up and down, but I think Port's just starting to find some form in Adelaide Oval. You give them the tick. Final one is West Coast versus Melbourne over in Optus Stadium. Look, it should be a Melbourne win. West Coast has been playing a lot better than they have over the last couple of years, but they have got a couple of injuries to their key players, so it should be an easy Melbourne win. Anything else, and yeah, you got to question a little bit of what's going on at Melbourne. Otherwise, that's the rest of us. Look, it's been an interesting one doing it by myself. Um, yeah, fun. It'll be similar next week. I think I have a few more little segments in store. So yeah, if you're a fan of like who's that footballer, things like that. Yeah, keep an eye out. There'll be one or two more. But otherwise, yeah, thank you for your time. If you did like this video and you've liked any of the past videos, give us a subscribe. They help. Like this video if you liked it too. They help too. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Cheers.